The staircase inside the service tower was old and worn, the kind of place where every footstep echoed in long metallic rings. Jax's boots made a steady rhythm against the steel steps as he carried the girl higher. The rain outside tapped faintly against the few cracked windows along the walls, but inside, the air felt still and heavy. The girl kept her head close to his shoulder. She was quiet, but her breathing was uneven, like every climb of the stairs took more from her than she wanted to admit. Jax tried not to hurry too much, knowing she was weak, but at the same time, something about this place made him want to get to the top quickly. There was a faint vibration in the air. It was not strong enough to make the walls shake, but it was there, almost like a gentle hum under the skin. He glanced at one of the walls as they passed. There were old maintenance panels built into the structure, most of them sealed shut. Some were covered in a thin layer of rust. Others had faint lines of glowing blue light escaping from cracks between the panels. It was strange. The tower was supposed to have been shut down years ago. Whatever was humming inside these walls was not on any official colony records. "You've been here before," Jax said, speaking quietly. The girl nodded against his shoulder. "Only once. I was brought here by someone. They didn't know I saw the way." Her answer was unusual, but she did not seem like she wanted to explain further. Jax decided not to press. He could feel her small hands clutching at his jacket, and he understood that trust was something she was giving carefully. They reached a landing where the stairs curved sharply upward. A large window looked out over the colony. The rain streaked down the glass, distorting the lights of the settlement below. Jax could see his workshop from here, a tiny warm glow in the distance, surrounded by the gray streets and the tall shadows of storage towers. Beyond that, the black outline of the hills disappeared into the low clouds. The girl shifted slightly in his arms to look out the window. "It looks small from here," she murmured. Jax followed her gaze. "It is small, but sometimes small places hide big things." She looked at him for a moment like she was deciding whether to say something, then turned her attention back to the stairs. "The top is where the big thing is." He kept climbing. The air grew cooler the higher they went. Some steps had a layer of fine dust, while others were cleaner, as if someone had walked them not long ago. Jax noticed a set of faint boot prints in the dust, larger than his own. That meant someone else had been here recently. The thought made him grip the girl a little tighter. A few flights later, they passed another maintenance door. This one was slightly ajar with a faint green light leaking from inside. Jax slowed, considering whether to look in, but the girl spoke softly. "Not yet. The room at the top is the one that matters." He nodded and kept going. His muscles began to burn from carrying her weight, but he ignored it. The girl was light, but the climb was long, and the spiral of the staircase felt endless. Every so often, the humming in the air seemed to grow stronger, almost like the tower itself was breathing. Finally, after what felt like dozens of turns, they reached another landing. This one was different. The metal railing here was newer, without rust. The dust on the floor was disturbed by many footsteps, not just one set. Faint markings were scratched into the walls, not words, but symbols Jax didn't recognize. Some looked like arrows pointing upward, others like curved lines wrapping around a circle. The girl's eyes followed the symbols as they climbed the last set of stairs. Her voice was softer now, as if she was speaking to herself. "It's still here. They didn't take it yet." Jax was about to ask what she meant when they reached a tall metal door. It was built into the wall at the very top of the tower, with thick hinges and a control panel on one side. The panel's screen glowed faintly, showing a language Jax had never seen. It wasn't standard colony code. The characters curved like flowing lines, almost artistic. The girl reached out and placed her hand on the control panel. The screen changed instantly, showing a single bright line of light. A faint click came from inside the door, and then it slid open with a slow hiss of air. The room beyond was dim, lit only by strips of pale light running along the floor. Jack stepped inside, his boots making almost no sound on the smooth surface. The walls here were not like the rest of the tower. They were smooth and dark, with faint patterns that seemed to shift if you looked at them too long. At the center of the room stood a large cylindrical object, its surface covered in the same flowing symbols as the control panel. It gave off a soft hum that matched the vibration Jax had felt since they entered the tower. "This is what I came to show you," the girl said quietly. Jax approached the cylinder. It was taller than he was and seemed to be made from a metal unlike anything he had seen in the colony. As he got closer, he noticed it wasn't a solid piece. Tiny lines ran across its surface, forming a web of panels that fit together perfectly. "What is it?" he asked. The girl looked at him with steady eyes. "It's a key." "A key to what?" "To a place that no one is supposed to remember." "But some do. My father told me about it before he disappeared. He said if I ever found it, I had to find someone who could help me keep it safe." Jax looked back at the cylinder. The hum seemed to grow stronger the longer he stood near it. There was a sense of power in the air, not dangerous, but ancient. "Why me?" Jax asked. The girl's expression didn't change. "Because you're human, and this was made for humans." Jax felt a chill that had nothing to do with the cold air, the tower, the humming, the symbols. It was all part of something far bigger than a sick child in the rain. He didn't know why, but he believed her. Before he could speak again, a faint sound echoed from the staircase below. It was the creak of a footstep on metal. Then another. Someone else was coming up the tower. The girl's eyes widened. "They found us." Jax turned toward the door. Whoever was climbing those stairs was moving fast. He didn't know who they were or what they wanted, but he knew one thing for certain. They weren't here by accident. The footsteps on the staircase grew louder, each one echoing up through the hollow tower. The sound was slow but steady, the kind of pace that told Jax whoever it was did not need to rush. It made him uneasy. People in a hurry often made noise, without thinking. People moving like this were confident. Jax scanned the room quickly. The metal door was still open behind them, but there was no lock on the inside. If someone reached the top of the stairs, they would walk right in. The girl kept her eyes on the cylinder in the middle of the room, as if she could not bear to look away from it. Her small hands gripped the sleeves of Jax's jacket. "They can't take it," she whispered. "Who?" Jax asked, keeping his voice low. "They're called seekers," she said. "They look for things that were lost, not to protect them, but to hide them again. Forever." Jax had never heard of such a group in the colony. But the certainty in her voice made him believe she was telling the truth. He looked back at the cylinder. Whatever it was, it clearly meant more than just a piece of forgotten tech. He needed to know why. "What does it unlock?" he asked. The girl looked up at him, her pale face serious. "A place my father called Haven Reach. He said it's somewhere. Humans built a long time ago before the colonies were divided. A place they kept safe, away from the wars. He said it's still out there, waiting. But no one can find it without the key." The footsteps drew closer. Jax counted them in his head, trying to guess how far down the intruder might be. Whoever it was had to be less than 2 flights away now. "How does this key work?" he asked, moving toward the cylinder. "It's not just a map," she said. "It's alive. My father said it can show the way, but only to those it trusts." Jax frowned. Machines didn't trust. They followed instructions. But then again, this cylinder didn't feel like any machine he had ever seen. The hum coming from it seemed almost like a heartbeat, slow and steady. The girl stepped closer and placed her hand on its surface. The flowing symbols shifted under her touch, glowing brighter. A faint image began to rise from the top of the cylinder, a hologram shaped like a star map. Dozens of points of light shone in the air, connected by thin lines. One of the points pulsed gently, almost like it was calling. "That's Haven Reach," she said, pointing to the glowing point. "It's far from here. Beyond the regular travel lanes, you'd need a ship that can handle deep jumps to reach it." Jax had worked on a few ships like that before, but they were rare, expensive, and almost always under tight control by the largest trade houses. Getting one would not be easy. Before he could ask more, the footsteps stopped. There was a long silence from the stairwell. Jax's grip tightened on the wrench hanging from his belt. He glanced toward the open door, expecting someone to appear at any moment. Then the silence broke. A slow knock came against the metal frame. Just once. Jax stepped slightly in front of the girl. "Who's there?" he called. A calm voice answered. "You have something that doesn't belong to you." The girl's grip on his jacket tightened. She shook her head at him, her eyes wide. "You're not getting it," Jax replied, keeping his tone steady. There was a pause, then the voice spoke again. "You can't keep it safe. You don't understand what it is. If you hand it over now, we'll leave you unharmed." Jax almost laughed at the choice of words. They didn't sound like someone offering help. They sounded like someone making a promise they had no reason to keep. "You should leave," Jax said. "This place isn't yours." There was another pause, and then the faint sound of boots moving away from the doorway. Jax didn't relax. The sound faded, but that could mean the person was circling around, looking for another way in. He turned to the girl. "We can't stay here." She nodded quickly. "If they take it, Haven Reach will stay hidden forever. My father said it's the only place left that still has what humans lost." "What did they lose?" Jax asked. She hesitated, as if choosing her words carefully. "A home. Not just a planet. A place that remembers who we were before everything broke apart. My father said it could make things right again." Jax wasn't sure what to think. It sounded like a story told to children, yet here was the key, glowing softly in the middle of a hidden room. And someone was willing to climb an abandoned tower in a storm to get it. That was enough proof for him that it mattered. He looked at the cylinder again. The glowing star map above it slowly faded as the girl removed her hand. The symbols returned to their dim, steady light. "Can it move?" Jax asked. "Yes," she said. "But it's heavy." Jax stepped forward and placed both hands on the cylinder. It was solid, but not as heavy as he expected. He could lift it if he kept his balance. The sound of movement returned, this time coming from below, but moving quickly upward. Whoever had been at the door wasn't alone anymore. Jax could hear more than one set of footsteps now. He looked at the girl. "We're going down the other way. Is there one?" She nodded and pointed to a narrow panel on the far side of the room. Jax set the cylinder down long enough to push against the wall. The panel slid aside to reveal a narrow maintenance shaft with a ladder leading down. "Go first," he told her. She climbed in, her small hands gripping the cold rungs. Jax followed, holding the cylinder tightly in one arm while using the other. To climb. The hum of the object seemed louder in the enclosed space. Above them, the sound of boots entered the room they had just left. Voices spoke in low tones, too quiet to make out. Jax didn't wait to hear more. He kept climbing down, his muscles straining under the awkward weight. The shaft led to a hidden exit near the base of the tower. When they emerged into the rain-soaked street, the girl looked back once toward the top of the tower. Her face was pale, but her eyes were steady. "They'll keep looking," she said, "but we can't stop now. We have to get off this colony." Jax adjusted his grip on the cylinder and glanced down the empty street. "Then we find a ship, and we make sure Haven Reach doesn't stay lost." Rain streamed down the narrow street as Jax and the girl moved quickly away from the service tower. The cylinder was heavy in his arms, and every step sent a faint vibration through him from the hum inside it. The storm had kept most people indoors, but the occasional flicker of movement in the shadows reminded him they were not alone. The girl walked beside him, her thin legs moving fast to keep up. She kept glancing over her shoulder, scanning the dark corners as if expecting the seekers to appear at any moment. "They know you took it," she said quietly. Jax nodded. "Then we don't give them the chance to take it back." His workshop was only a few streets away, but getting there meant passing through the open square. The square was wide and empty, lit only by a few dim street lamps that swayed in the wind. The puddles on the ground reflected the lights, making the space look even larger. Jax hated crossing open areas when someone might be following. There was no cover, no easy place to hide. Still, there was no other route that wouldn't add 10 minutes to their journey, and every minute mattered. They stepped into the square, boots splashing in the shallow water. Jax kept his eyes moving, scanning the surrounding buildings for any sign of movement. The rain made it hard to see far, but nothing seemed out of place. Halfway across, the girl slowed. Her gaze was fixed on the far side of the square. Jax followed her line of sight and spotted two figures in long coats standing near a closed shop. Their faces were hidden in shadow, but the way they stood, still watching, told him everything he needed to know. "They're here," the girl whispered. Jax didn't wait to see if they would move. He gripped the cylinder tighter and broke into a quick stride. The girl ran beside him, her small footsteps splashing against the wet ground. The two figures began walking as well, not rushing, but matching their pace. The rain seemed to grow, heavier, masking the sound of their steps but not their presence. By the time Jax reached the other side of the square, his workshop was in sight. He unlocked the heavy door and pushed it open, letting the girl slip inside before following. Once they were in, he locked it again and lowered the metal bar across it. The workshop was warm compared to the street. The smell of oil and metal filled the air. Jax set the cylinder down on his main work table, its faint glow casting soft patterns on the walls. The girl stood beside it, her small hands resting lightly on the surface. "It's still listening," she said. Jax frowned. "Listening to what?" "To where it needs to go." He looked at her, waiting for more, but she kept her eyes on the cylinder. The humming sound seemed stronger here, almost like it was aware of their safety. Jax walked to a shelf and pulled down a cloth to dry his hands. "If it's alive like you say, can it talk?" "Not with words," she said. "It shows things, like before." She placed both hands on the cylinder again, and the symbols lit up brighter than before. The star map rose into the air, filling the space above the work table. Jax could see the same glowing point she had called Haven Reach, but now the map seemed larger, showing more detail. Thin lines pulsed faintly, moving toward the point like a path being drawn. "That's the route," she said, "but it changes. It's not always safe to take the same way twice. The key knows when it's dangerous and finds another path." Jax studied the map. The route curved far beyond the common travel lanes, into empty regions where no trade ships went. It would be a long journey, and not one he could make in the small cargo hauler parked behind his workshop. He would need a faster ship, one with deep jump capability. "There's a problem," he said. "I don't have a ship that can get us there." The girl didn't look away from the map. "We can get one." He almost laughed at how simple she made it sound. But before he could respond, the sound of movement came from outside the workshop door. Slow, measured footsteps splashed through the rain. Jax reached over and switched off the map. The room dimmed instantly, leaving only the faint glow from the cylinder's surface. "Stay here," he told her. He moved to the window and peeked out through the narrow gap in the shutters. The two figures from the square were standing across the street, their faces still hidden by shadow. They weren't trying to enter yet, but their presence was a clear warning. Jack stepped back from the window. "They're watching the workshop. We can't leave through the front." The girl pointed toward the back of the workshop. "There's another way." Jax led her to a narrow storage area. He moved a stack of metal crates aside, revealing a hidden hatch in the floor. He had built it years ago as a way to move heavy parts between the workshop and the storage tunnels below. The hatch opened with a creak and cold air rose from the darkness below. Jax grabbed a small lamp from the shelf, lit it, and handed it to the girl. "Stay close to me," he said. They climbed down into the tunnel, closing the hatch above them. The sound of the rain and the outside world faded, replaced by the hollow echo of their footsteps. The air smelled of old dust and metal, but it was dry. The tunnel led to a hidden chamber Jax had used for years to store spare parts and tools that didn't fit in the workshop. It was larger than most people would expect from the outside, with shelves of supplies lining the walls. The girl set the lamp on a crate, and the warm light filled the room. Jax placed the cylinder on a sturdy table in the center of the chamber. Here, surrounded by quiet, the hum felt stronger than ever. The girl looked at him seriously. "We can't stay here long. The Seekers will search everywhere." "I know," Jax said, "but first I need to figure out how to move this thing without attracting attention, and we still need a ship." The girl stepped closer to the cylinder, resting her hand on it again. The symbols glowed faintly. "It will help. My father told me the key finds the people it needs." Jax didn't know if he believed that, but he was starting to think this strange object had already pulled him into something far bigger than himself. Above them, faintly through the layers of steel and stone, came the sound of boots moving again. The Seekers were still out there, patient and waiting. Jax glanced at the girl, then at the glowing cylinder. "Then we'd better make our move before they do." The tunnels beneath the workshop were dark and narrow, built long before Jax had arrived on Varela 9. The walls were lined with old cables, most of them dead, but a few still carried a faint hum of power. Jax carried the cylinder close to his chest, feeling its steady vibration against his arms. The girl walked just behind him, holding the small lamp that lit their way. The sound of boots echoed faintly from somewhere above. The Seekers were moving through the streets, searching. Jax knew it was only a matter of time before they found the hatch behind his workshop. "We can't go back to the surface here," Jax said. "They'll be waiting." The girl nodded. "There's another exit. My father used it once." She led him through a side tunnel, one that sloped gently downward. The air grew cooler, and the faint smell of damp earth replaced the dry dust. The tunnel opened into a wider space where several paths branched off. Jax slowed, looking at her for direction. She pointed to the narrowest passage. "This way," she said. They moved quickly, the narrow passage forcing them to walk in single file. The floor was uneven and water dripped from the low ceiling. Jax could feel the weight of the colony above. Them, a constant reminder that they were moving through spaces most people had forgotten. After several minutes, they reached a rusted metal door. The girl set the lamp down and pulled a small piece of thin metal from her pocket. She worked it into the lock with surprising skill, and after a moment, the door creaked open. Beyond it was a storage bay filled with old mining equipment. The bay was connected to a loading tunnel that led toward the spaceport at the edge of the colony. Jax stepped inside, scanning the shadows for movement. "If we can get to the port," he said, "we can find a ship." The girl glanced at the cylinder. "Not just any ship. It has to go farther than the normal lanes." "I know," Jax said, "and that means something fast, with a long-range jump core." They crossed the bay and entered the loading tunnel. It was wider here, and faint light filtered down from vents above. The hum of machinery in the distance told Jax they were getting closer to the port, but before they reached the end, the sound of footsteps returned, this time from both ahead and behind. "They're here," the girl whispered. Jax's eyes darted around the tunnel. On the left, a service hatch was set into the wall. He opened it quickly and found a maintenance walkway running parallel to the main tunnel. It was narrow and dusty, but it would keep them out of sight. They slipped inside and closed the hatch behind them. The walkway was barely wide enough for the two of them, but it led in the same direction as the main tunnel. Through narrow gaps in the wall, Jax could see shadows moving in the main tunnel. Tall figures in dark coats, their faces hidden by masks. The seekers moved with quiet precision, scanning the space with small devices that glowed faintly blue. Jax knew they were looking for the cylinder. The walkway ended at a ladder that led upward. Jax climbed first, pushing open the hatch at the top. They emerged in a storage lot filled with shipping crates and repair pods. In the distance, the tall structures of the spaceport rose against the stormy sky. "This is our chance," Jax said. They moved quickly between the crates, keeping low to avoid being seen. The rain had lessened, but the wet ground reflected every bit of light, making shadows harder to hide in. Jax spotted a small ship being loaded nearby, a sleek courier vessel with a deep-jump engine. A trader in a heavy coat was supervising the loading. "That ship could work," Jax said. The girl nodded. "Then we need to get on it before it leaves." As they approached, the trader turned and spotted them. His eyes narrowed. "This is a restricted loading area," he said sharply. Jax kept his voice calm. "I can pay you to take us off-world. We just need a quick jump out of the system." The trader shook his head. "Not without clearance." The girl stepped forward, her voice steady despite her size. "We don't have time, they're coming." The trader looked past them toward the lot. Two seekers had appeared at the far end, scanning the area. The trader's expression shifted. "Who are they?" he asked. "Trouble," Jax said. "The kind that doesn't care about rules." The trader hesitated for a moment, then gestured toward the ship. "Get inside, fast." They hurried aboard. The ship's interior was small but clean, with a narrow corridor leading to the cockpit. Jax set the cylinder down carefully and strapped it into a cargo net. The trader took the pilot's seat, powering up the engines. Outside, the seekers moved. Faster now, their long coats snapping in the wind. The engines roared to life, and the ship began to lift. Rain streaked across the cockpit windows as they rose above the port. But the seekers weren't finished. One of them raised a device, and a sudden pulse of blue light hit the ship. The controls flickered, and the engines stuttered for a moment. "They're trying to disable us," the trader said through gritted teeth. "Can you break free?" Jax asked. "I can if I push the engines harder than I should," the trader replied. "Then do it," Jax said. The ship's engines roared again, and the vessel surged upward. The pulse faded, and the controls steadied. Within moments, they were above the colony, climbing toward the clouds. Jax looked at the girl. She was staring out the window, her hands clasped tightly together. "They won't stop," she said quietly. "Even in space, they'll follow." Jax nodded. "Then we make sure we're faster." The trader glanced at them. "Where are you going?" Jax hesitated, then looked at the girl. She met his gaze, and her voice was calm when she answered. "Haven Reach." The trader frowned. "Never heard of it." "You will," the girl said. The ship broke through the clouds into the darkness of space. Stars stretched out in all directions, and the hum of the cylinder seemed to grow stronger, as if it knew they were finally on their way. The rain had grown heavier. Water splashed off the broken rooftops of the colony, and the smell of metal and wet dust filled the air. Jax gripped the star map tightly under his jacket as he followed the sick little girl through the narrow walkway that connected the tower to the back streets. Behind them, the sound of boots on metal stairs echoed like a steady drum. Whoever was following was not far away. The girl kept glancing over her shoulder. Her breath was short, but her eyes were sharp and full of urgency. "They will not stop," she whispered. "They want the map, and they want me." Jax could see her shivering, both from cold and fear. He knew she did not have the strength to keep running for long. He also knew that if the map fell into the wrong hands, the secret she had trusted him with would be lost forever. That left him with only one option: get her out of here fast. He scanned the street ahead. Old service lifts were bolted to the side of the buildings. Most of them were broken, rusted into place after years of no use. But one of them, halfway down the block, looked like it might still work. It was covered in a metal cage, and its cable hung down into a maintenance shaft. If he could get it running, it might take them to the lower docks. From there, they could blend into the crowd and disappear. "Hold on," Jack said as he picked her up again. She felt light in his arms, almost weightless. He moved quickly toward the lift, stepping over puddles and avoiding piles of scrap. The footsteps behind them grew louder. A voice called out in the distance, ordering someone to block the street ahead. They reached the lift and Jack set the girl down carefully against the wall. He pulled open the control box with his multi-tool. Inside, the wiring was dusty, but the circuits were still intact. Years of working on old cargo haulers had taught him that sometimes machines needed more persuasion than repair. He crossed 2 wires, heard a spark, and the motor hummed faintly. The girl clutched her small satchel close to her chest as she watched him work. "Can it take us all the way down?" she asked. "If the cables hold," he said without looking. "Up! It will!" The humming grew louder, and the lift shuddered as its brakes released. Jax pulled the gate open, helped her inside, and stepped in after her. He pressed the lever, and the lift began to descend slowly. For a moment, it seemed like they were safe. The rain was softer here, dripping from the edge of the shaft. Jax could hear the distant hum of colony generators. But then a shadow appeared above them. A figure leaned over the edge of the platform they had just left. Jax caught the glint of a metal visor. The figure shouted something in a language Jax did not know. A second later, the sound of a grappling hook shot down the shaft. The metal claw latched onto the lift's cage with a sharp clang. The lift jerked and slowed. "They are pulling us back," the girl said, her voice trembling. Jax looked around quickly. He spotted the emergency release on the side of the lift, a lever that would drop it faster in case of fire. It was risky because the old brakes might fail entirely, but if they did not act, they would be dragged back up into the hands of whoever was chasing them. He pulled the lever. The lift groaned and then shot downward, faster than before. The wind whistled through the cage as the floors blurred past. The grappling hook's cable snapped with a sharp crack, and the shadow above disappeared from view. The girl held onto the side of the cage, her eyes wide. Jax kept one hand on her shoulder to steady her as they dropped. At last, the lift slowed and came to a stop at the lower docks. The air here was warmer and smelled faintly of fuel. Cargo crates were stacked high, and dock workers of many species moved through the area, their voices mixing with the roar of engines. This was good. The crowd would hide them. Jax led the girl into the maze of crates. He kept his head down, moving like someone who belonged here. The girl stayed close, her hood pulled low over her face. They found a narrow space between 2 containers where they could rest for a moment. Jax took out the map from under his jacket. Even in the dim light, the star map's lines glowed faintly, with navigation data. It was more than just routes. There were markings for stations, hidden waypoints, and supply caches. Whoever had made this map had planned for survival in the farthest reaches of space. The girl's voice was soft when she spoke. "My father made it. He was a human explorer, searching for the stronghold. When he disappeared, I kept the map hidden. They want it because they fear what humans could rebuild." Jax looked at her for a long moment. "Why trust me with it?" "Because you carried me," she said simply, "and you did not ask for anything in return." Before he could reply, a loud metallic crash echoed from the far side of the docks. He saw armored figures pushing through the crowd, scanning faces and questioning workers. The pursuers had not given up. Jax took a deep breath and made his choice. "We need to get off this colony tonight." He knew of an old transport pilot who sometimes took work with no questions asked. If they could reach his ship before the search teams closed in, they might have a chance. They moved quickly, weaving through the crowd. The rain had stopped, but the air was thick with the smell of fuel and ozone. As they neared the docking bays, Jax could hear the rumble of engines, warming up. Time was running out. Finally, they reached a small freighter with faded paint and dented hull plates. The pilot, a short alien with quick eyes, was loading crates into the hold. He looked up in surprise when he saw Jax. "I need passage off Varela 9, Jax said firmly. "Right now." The pilot's gaze shifted to the girl and then back to Jax. "Not free." Jax opened his jacket just enough for the pilot to see the edge of the star map. The pilot's eyes widened slightly and then he nodded. "Get aboard, now." Jax and the girl hurried into the ship as the pilot sealed the hatch. The engines roared louder and the docking clamps released. Through the small porthole, Jax saw the search teams arrive at the bay. Too late. As the freighter lifted into the sky. The girl sat beside him, still holding her satchel. Her breathing was shallow, but there was a small, tired smile on her face. They had escaped for now, but Jax knew their journey was only beginning. The freighter hummed softly as it moved through space, leaving the stormy skies of Varela 9 far behind. Jax sat beside the little girl, who was resting quietly now. The soft glow from the cylinder on the table cast gentle shadows across the small cabin. Outside the windows, stars stretched endlessly in every direction. Jax looked down at the star map again. The glowing point for Haven Reach still pulsed softly in the air. The path ahead was long and uncertain, but for the first time, he felt a sense of hope. This was more than a journey. It was a chance to rebuild something lost. The girl opened her eyes and looked at him with a faint smile. "Thank you for saving me." Jax shook his head. "I didn't save you. You saved me. You showed me there's something worth fighting for." She reached into her satchel and pulled out a small, worn pendant. It was shaped like a star, made of metal that caught the light in a way Jax had never seen. "My father gave this to me," she said softly. "He said it was a symbol of the old explorers, the ones who believed humans could find a new home." Jax took the pendant carefully and held it in his hand. It felt warm, almost alive. He looked back at the star map. "We're going to Haven Reach," he said quietly. "We'll find that place your father spoke of." The girl nodded. "It's waiting for us." The pilot, who had been silent during their conversation, entered the cabin. His eyes were sharp but kind. "You have a long trip ahead," he said. "The routes beyond the normal lanes are dangerous. You'll need to trust." "The key." Jax looked at the cylinder and then at the girl. "It will guide us?" The girl smiled slightly. "Yes, but only if we listen." Over the next few hours, Jax learned how to read the shifting lines of the star map. The glowing paths changed as the cylinder scanned space, searching for safe routes. The map was alive, showing hidden dangers and secret waypoints that could not be seen on any standard navigation charts. They passed through asteroid fields where the debris moved slowly in the weightless darkness. The cylinder's light pulsed faster, warning them of dangers hidden among the rocks. Jax guided the ship carefully, avoiding the hazards that might have destroyed a lesser pilot. At one point, the ship entered a nebula of swirling colors, bright and beautiful, but filled with dangerous radiation. The star map glowed softly, revealing a hidden path through the cloud. The pilot followed the directions without hesitation. During the journey, Jax and the girl shared stories of the past. She told him about her father's dream of a place where humans could unite, away from the fights and fears of the colonies. Jax spoke of his own struggles, how he had once believed the world was too broken to fix. Now, together, they both believed something different. Days passed, and the stars around them slowly shifted. The glowing point of Haven Reach grew larger in the star map. The anticipation in the cabin grew with it. Then, One quiet morning, the cylinder's hum changed. It became steady and clear, almost like a heartbeat. The star map pulsed brightly, and the pilot announced, "We're close." Jax and the girl looked out the windows. In the distance, a blue-green planet rotated slowly in the sunlight. It was beautiful and untouched, with oceans and forests visible from space. "It's real," the girl whispered. Jack smiled. "It's real." As they prepared to land, the girl held the cylinder close. "This is the beginning of everything," she said. The ship touched down on a smooth plain near the coast. The air outside was fresh and clean. Jack stepped out first, feeling the soft grass under his boots. The girl followed, looking around with wide eyes full of wonder. Together, they began to explore this new world, a place where humans could rebuild, learn from their past, and create a future of hope. Jax looked at the girl and said, "We made it." She nodded. "And we will protect it." The cylinder's glow faded gently, its mission complete for now. But Jax knew this was only the start of a greater journey. They had found Haven Reach, a new beginning for humanity.